Let me tell you what $1,400 looks like in America first. It is a studio apartment where rent takes $1,200 and leaves $200 for everything else. Food, medication, electricity. You make calls to your kids from a parking lot because the library Wi-Fi is better than what you can afford at home. It is survival dressed up as retirement. I lived that for 2 years in Indiana after 38 years on a food processing line. Physical work, the kind that sends a bill to your joints at 55 and expects payment. I am not complaining. It gave me a paid-off house, 2 kids through college, and the Social Security check a man earns by showing up every day, regardless of what his knees think about it. What it did not give me was enough. Not in America. Not anymore. So I did the math. And then I got on a plane.
I retired at 66. My wife Linda had died 4 years before that. A stroke. Fast. The way the doctor said was a mercy, and the way I have spent 6 years deciding whether I agree with. The house felt different after Linda. Technically the same structure. Functionally a different kind of place. A place that used to mean something and now just meant square footage, and a property tax bill, and the particular sound of a refrigerator running in a kitchen where nobody is cooking anything worth running a refrigerator for. I stayed in Indiana for 2 years after I retired, because leaving felt like the kind of decision a man makes in grief that he regrets in clarity. So I waited for clarity, and when it came, it confirmed what the grief had already known. There was nothing tying me to that square footage except the weight of not moving, which is not the same thing as a reason. The Social Security check is $1,412. I know the number exactly the way you know a number you have calculated against every expense in your life for 2 years running. For 2 years I knew that number intimately, knew where it bent and where it broke, knew that it covered the rent on the small apartment I'd moved into after selling the house and the utilities and the food if I was careful, and left somewhere between $40 and $80 at the end of the month for everything else. For the unexpected, for the human need to occasionally spend money on something that isn't strictly necessary, for the dignity of not counting every individual purchase before you make it. $40 to $80 of dignity per month. That is what I had. My son Marcus, who lives in Atlanta and who has his mother's way of saying hard things gently, sat me down on a video call in the 2nd year and said, "Dad, I want to talk to you about options." And I said, "Marcus, I've been talking to myself about options for 2 years. What have you got?" And he said, "Have you thought about going somewhere else?" I had not thought about it. I was from Indiana. My people were from Indiana. The idea of somewhere else had never been a category my life operated in. But Marcus had a coworker, a woman whose father had gone to the Philippines at 68, and who sent back reports that Marcus described as almost unreasonably positive. Too positive, he said, to be entirely believed, but maybe worth investigating. I investigated for 4 months. I am a methodical man. 38 years on a processing line will make you methodical, because methodical is the difference between a day that works and a day that doesn't. And in that environment, the difference matters, in ways that are immediate and physical. So I read forums, blogs, Facebook groups for American retirees abroad, YouTube channels, consulate websites, healthcare cost comparisons, exchange rate histories. I made a spreadsheet because that is the kind of man I am, and the spreadsheet told me something that I made myself read 3 times to be sure I was reading it correctly. The same $1,412 that bought me survival in Indiana could buy me something else entirely, somewhere else. Could buy me, if the numbers were accurate, and they appeared to be, a life. Not a comfortable poverty, an actual life. I booked the flight in October. One way, because I am 68 years old, and I do not have the luxury of return tickets as security blankets, time being what it is at 68. I chose a city called Dumaguete on the island of Negros because the research kept returning to it for people in my specific situation. Older, alone, fixed income, not looking for nightlife or beaches particularly, looking for a place that was manageable and quiet, and where the English was good enough that a man who speaks only English and a handful of Spanish words he learned from a co-worker in 1987 could function. I will tell you what I felt stepping off the small propeller plane at that little airport, because honest writing requires honoring the actual sensation before it becomes memory. I felt the heat first, immediate, total, the kind of heat that has made a decision about you before you've made any decision about it. I felt the smell of the place, something I could not identify at first, sweet and green and faintly smoky, which I later learned was a combination of flowering trees and charcoal cooking fires and the particular agricultural smell of an island that grows things in its soil rather than in its economy. I felt, underneath both of those, a low hum of anxiety that I want to name honestly because pretending it wasn't there would be lying to you about a real part of this. I was 68 years old. I had never been further from home than a family trip to Florida in 1994. I spoke one language. I knew not a single person on this island. And somewhere between the research and the spreadsheet and the one-way ticket, I had committed myself to an experiment whose failure condition was not something I had fully let myself picture. A man named Dodong was waiting outside the terminal with a small cardboard sign and my name on it, misspelled, in a way that was close enough. He drove a tricycle, the three-wheeled motorcycle taxis that are the circulatory system of that city, and he had an uncle who rented rooms, and the rooms were available, and would I like to see them? And all of this was delivered in English, of sufficient clarity, that my anxiety dropped several degrees in the first 3 minutes of being in the country. The room his uncle rented was on the second floor of a narrow concrete building on a street that was alive in the particular way of streets in that part of the world. Small shops at every ground floor, music from somewhere, the smell of garlic frying that I have since come to understand is a constant condition of that city. Not a meal happening nearby, but simply the air itself. Garlic-inflected, permanent, and quickly beloved. The room was clean. The fan was strong. The window looked onto a mango tree close enough that the branches touched the screen. $50 a month. I want you to sit with that number. $50. I sat on the edge of the bed in that room and looked at the mango tree and thought, Joe, you are either very brave or very stupid, and only the next 6 months will tell you which. The woman who owned the building was named Ate Nena. 8 is the honorific for an older woman, something like Miss but warmer, and Nena deployed it for herself with the authority of a woman who has run a building for 30 years and knows how it should be run. She was perhaps 65, stout, with reading glasses on a beaded cord around her neck, and an expression that was simultaneously welcoming and assessing. She assessed me for approximately 10 seconds upon our introduction, and then appeared to reach a verdict that satisfied her, because she showed me where the water heater switch was, and told me the Wi-Fi password, and said breakfast was included and would be on the table at 7, and if I wanted something different from what she made, I was welcome to want it somewhere else. I didn't want anything different from what she made. In 38 years of eating alone in a break room or alone at a kitchen table, I had not had breakfast included. I didn't know what to do with the concept. The first morning I sat down to a plate of sinangag, garlic fried rice, and a fried egg, and a cup of coffee already made, and waiting. And I sat there for a moment feeling something I couldn't immediately name, and then I named it. I felt expected. Someone had made food in anticipation of my presence. Someone had factored me into their morning. After 4 years of being a man whose presence or absence was a matter of complete indifference to every morning in America, the garlic rice hit me somewhere that had nothing to do with hunger. Let me tell you about the first weeks honestly, because I got things wrong, and the wrong things are instructive. I got the sun wrong first. Indiana sun is a manageable thing. It rises, it travels, it sets, it does not require strategy. Philippine sun at midday is an opponent, not a backdrop, and I treated it like a backdrop for the first 10 days, and paid for it in exhaustion and a headache behind my eyes that took 2 full days to break. You learn. You learn to do everything that requires moving before 10 in the morning and after 4 in the afternoon, and to treat the hours between as a polite suggestion to be horizontal. I got the street crossings wrong, which I have since learned is universal among people from countries where traffic has rules. Traffic in Dumaguete has something better than rules. It has consensus. A moving, real-time, unconscious consensus among thousands of tricycles and motorcycles and the occasional jeepney that operates by principles visible only to participants. You learn to walk into it slowly and trust the consensus to accommodate you. This takes longer than 10 days to trust and involves, in the learning period, several moments of standing on a curb, convincing yourself that this is survivable. And I got the silence wrong. By which I mean, I didn't know what to do with the fact that people talked to me. Everyone talked to me. The woman at the small convenience store, the sari-sari, who wanted to know where I was from and how long I was staying, and whether I was alone, and whether I had eaten. The old men playing chess outside the barangay hall who made room on the bench without being asked, and explained the game to me in a mixture of English and Cebuano that somehow communicated more than either language would have managed separately. The children who practiced English on me, with the enthusiasm of people using a skill they've been told will be useful, and are delighted to find a situation where it applies. I didn't know what to do with being spoken to by strangers as a matter of ordinary course. I kept looking for the angle, the way an Indiana boy looks for the angle when a stranger is friendly. There was no angle. It took me a while to stop looking. The thing that ended my looking was a woman named Merle. Merle ran a carinderia 3 streets back from the boulevard. A carinderia is the local version of a lunch counter, though lunch is a limited description of what it does, because Merle was open from 6 in the morning until the food ran out, which on most days was somewhere around 2 in the afternoon. The carinderia was 8 plastic tables in a room with no walls on 2 sides and an industrial fan that moved the air around without pretending to cool it. And Merle moved through it with the efficiency of someone who had been feeding people in that specific space for 20 years and had optimized every step. I found it in my second week, following a simple principle I had read about in the research, and which turned out to be the best advice anyone gave me about eating in that country, which was to go where you see motorcycles parked and working men eating. Working men eating in the Philippines know where the food is real and the price is honest. The food at Merle's was real. The first day I pointed at what the man beside me was having, which turned out to be sinigang, a sour tamarind soup with pork and vegetables that did something to my sinuses in a way I was not prepared for, and that I immediately wanted to experience again. 45 pesos. I looked at that number on the handwritten price board for a moment, the way you look at something when your brain is running the conversion, and the conversion seems too favorable to be accurate. Less than $1 for the soup and the rice that came with it, which was its own quantity. A quantity suggesting that the correct amount of rice is the amount just before it becomes alarming, and the small dish of fish sauce with chilies on the side. Merle watched me eat with the evaluative attention of a professional who takes her evaluation seriously. When I finished, she said, without preamble, "Spicy okay?" I said very much yes. She nodded as if this confirmed something. And the next day when I came back, which I came back every day from that day forward, she put the fish sauce with extra chilies on my table before I sat down. She had simply decided this was my preference and acted on it. Removed the question from the equation. There's a whole philosophy in that, and it took me longer than it should have to understand it, because I came from a culture where service is transactional, and transactions are completed and concluded, and do not produce obligations of memory. What Merle was practicing was something else. She had noticed me, formed an assessment, and incorporated that assessment into how she treated me going forward. I had become, in the vocabulary that matters in that part of the world, a regular. Not just a repeat customer, a regular, which is a relationship, which carries with it the specific human warmth of being known. 6 weeks in, I moved out of Ate Nena's room and into a small house. I want to say apartment, but the Philippines uses the word house for what is technically a small standalone concrete structure in a compound of similar structures behind a gate, and it does feel like a house, in a way that matters. 2 rooms, a kitchen separated from the main room by a counter rather than a wall, a bathroom that was clean and functional, a small porch in the front that looked onto the compound's shared space, a papaya tree in that space that belonged to everyone in the same unarticulated way that common things belong to everyone in close quarters. 10,000 pesos a month, $178 at the exchange rate that month. I have looked at that number many times in the year since I wrote the first check, and it has not become less remarkable. My neighbor in the compound was a woman named Aling Beth. Aling is the honorific for older women in Tagalog, and it had followed her from Manila, where she'd lived for 30 years before moving back to her home island to be near her daughter's family. She was 71, retired from government work, with a vegetable garden in 2 large plastic containers on her porch, that she tended with a seriousness appropriate to a much larger agricultural operation. She grew kangkong and pechay and a small hot pepper called siling labuyo that she offered me a branch of in the first week, and that I accepted and subsequently treated with the respect it deserved, which is significant respect. Aling Beth spoke English, the way educated Filipinos of her generation speak it, which is precisely and without apology, and she had opinions about everything, including the correct way to cook the vegetables she grew and the incorrect way that most people cook them, and the specific reasons why my attempts, when I described them, fell into the incorrect category. She corrected my cooking the way a good teacher corrects a student, with the assumption that correction is helpful and that the student's feelings about being corrected are secondary to the student's improvement. She also, on the 3rd week, without announcement, began leaving vegetables from her containers on my porch. A bundle of kangkong, a handful of small tomatoes, twice a week, always on the porch before I was up, always without a note because the vegetables were self-explanatory. I tried to pay her once. She looked at the money and then at me with an expression that required no translation, and I put the money away and have not tried again. I want to stop here and give you the numbers, because I know that's what you came for, and because I believe in being straight about money in a way that some of these stories aren't. The house is 10,000 pesos, $178. Electricity runs about $15 to $18 in a normal month. I run the 1 air conditioning unit in the bedroom at night, and I do not apologize for this. At 68 with blood pressure medication and a knee that registers every weather change before the weather does, nighttime temperature is not negotiable. The fan in the living room handles the days. Water is $3 to $4. The internet is $30 for fiber that is faster than what I had in Indiana for 3 times the price. Food. This is where the number becomes something that requires a moment to appreciate. I eat breakfast at the compound. I make it myself. Eggs from the small market that cost almost nothing. Rice from the 50-kilo sack that Aling Beth advised me to buy, and that lasts 2 months at the rate I go through it. Lunch at Merle's most days. 45 to 60 pesos depending on what she's made. Dinner I vary. Sometimes I cook Aling Beth's vegetables and whatever protein I picked up at the market that morning. Sometimes I eat at the small place on the boulevard, where the grilled chicken, inasal, costs 80 pesos and tastes like it was designed specifically to make you understand that chicken is capable of things you previously didn't know chicken was capable of.